Before I introduce our speaker, really our intent for this continuing education today is, hopefully increasing your understanding of community-based care, how it operates. We're going to be gaining some insight into what community-based care is, and sometimes otherwise known as CBC, if you hear that. It's kind of an abbreviated acronym. And how it affects you as an advocate, or whatever role you play here, and the children that we work with. And we are also going to be learning about any types of updates and changes that will be occurring in our region, which is Region 4. So I want to introduce our guest speaker today, Michael Roberts. Michael Roberts joined the Office of Community-Based Care Transition in August of 2022, so here recently, as a community-based care administrator. And he and his team are working across our region, Region 4, to help ensure a smooth transition, to CBC, community-based care. So Michael has been working with DFPS for over 10 years, and you've worked in investigations and also as a supervisor and served as a facilitator in family group decision-making. So we're so excited to have you here. Please welcome Michael Roberts.
Jared.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you. All right, so happy to be here again. My name is Michael Roberts. So I go by Michael, Mike. I also go by Roberts because of my last name. Also by Matthew and Mark. And I don't know where Matthew and Mark came from, but I just kind of roll with it. So yeah, so just to kind of touch base a little bit on my tenure with the agency. I started about a little over 10 years ago. I started in Cherokee County as an investigator. I did that for about 3 years, and then I transitioned into a supervisor over in Henderson County, Athens. That lasted for about a hot minute. I quickly realized that I was not supervisor material, and so I voluntarily demoted back to being an investigator in Cherokee County. Did that for about another 2.5 years. And then then after that, I moved into family group decision making. I facilitated family group conferences, permanency conferences, circles of support, that sort of thing. And then August, I moved over to state office into community-based care, and I am a community-based care administrator, or a CBCA. And so I'll just kind of talk a little bit about community-based care today. My PowerPoint is directed, and the insight that I'm trying to give you is from the perspective of the department. What is changing with Department of Family and Protective Services with community-based care? And then how does it affect CASA and other external stakeholders? And so I'm pretty flexible. I don't have to get through my PowerPoint for you guys to stop and ask me questions. So if you have a burning question, you can tell it, ask it now, stop me in the middle of it, that sort of thing. So yeah, we'll just start with that. Anybody have any questions at the beginning? If not, we can kind of get through it. All right. So I am the CBCA for Region 4, which consists of about 23 counties. I have a little slide in here that shows the map. When we transition to community-based care, we'll no longer be Region 4. We'll be called Piney Woods, and so that's why we have Piney Woods in Region 4. So and we're no longer going to be regions, we're going to be what are called catchment areas. And so that kind of changes a little bit too. So
what would you say?
They're called catchment areas. Okay. So I guess,
Is that a word?
Yeah, catchment. So
That stands for something?
I already have technical issues. So there we go. Oh, there we go.
Should be able to click on this and your clicker should work now.
All right. Perfect. All right, so I work for the Office of Community-Based Care Transition Team, OCBCT, and it was created in the last legislative session, the 87th session, and it was Senate Bill 1896 specifically that created the office that I work for. And so our office is designed to transition from what we call a legacy system, or the current DFPS system, over to community-based care. And so we are working with both DFPS and the community-based care provider and implementing that into whatever region that we're in. I still work for, I guess my paychecks are paid for by DFPS, but the my office is separate from DFPS. We are administratively attached through just like when it comes to tax and it comes to finance and that sort of thing, we're still connected to DFPS, but the director of our office reports directly to the governor, and they are actually an appointed position by the governor. And so we recently just went through that transition. And so the director of OCBCT, his name is George Kanata, and he was just appointed to replace our previous director. So we're still linked to DFPS, but we're our own office. All right, so we actually have 3 teams within our office. We have 2 implementation teams, and then we have 1 team that deals with community outreach and also the legislative team as well. So, all right, so as you can see on the screen, within like the implementation team, we have our CBCAs, which is me. We have 1 per region. So we have 1 for region 4. I have a counterpart in region 5. There's a couple in the Dallas area. We have some up in the Panhandle, the Texoma area, and then also down in, let's see, the San Antonio area. We have some there. We're still, as we get new areas that are approved to go to the community-based care side, we're going to start hiring some more CBCAs for those specific areas. We also have contract administration managers, or our CAMs. They deal with contracts before a contract signed with a potential provider, and then afterwards help maintaining that and any other contracts that might come up. And so that's kind of what our CAMs do as well. And so our outreach and legislative team, they have 5 program specialists, and yeah, they just, we have one that supports regions 4 and 5. And so if I need any assistance, during meetings and stuff, her name is Shay. She'll come in and just kind of help provide some of that support. And then anything that's dealing with the legislative session, like they're super busy right now, looking at bills, reviewing bills, that sort of thing. And so, and then if there's any community outreach that they can do, they also help kind of participate in that. So that's just kind of a breakdown of my office and who I'm working for at this time. And so this is our beautiful organizational chart. As you can kind of tell that we're kind of our own office, and then, we're just attached to the commissioner or to DFPS that way. So, and all our lovely faces and everything's right there. So it's super hard to see, but, and then I'm way down there, which is cool. But all right, so enough about me and enough about our office. What is community-based care? And really what it is it's just a model, and it's a new way of providing foster services to local communities. And so prior to, I guess, the federal lawsuit that's going on, foster care system was ran by the state of Texas, and the state of Texas is an extremely small state. So it's very easy to, roll out foster care, right? So it's one of the largest states. It's ginormous. I heard the other day that you can fit like 5 Floridas into the state of Texas. And so it's an extremely big state, and it was extremely difficult for, the state of Texas to implement a solid foster care system that was suitable for every area. I mean, we're vastly different than the Metroplex. We're vastly different than the Panhandle, the Hill Country. And so with the transition from a state-ran foster care to the CBC, we're trying to focus on local communities, focusing on the local strengths that are there, and really bringing back foster care system to provide and meet the needs of the families and the youth that are in the foster care system. And so with that, CPS is going to partner with what we call a single source continuum contractor, or an SSCC. And that SSCC is going to come in and they when an area is open, they come in and they bid for an area. And if they are awarded the bid and the contract is signed, they become the provider for that area. So, and I'll get more into this kind of where region 4 is at with that. But that SSCC is going to come in and they're going to draw on the strengths of the local community. And part of their responsibility is going to be building up the network capacity within the region, and just, bringing back services and resources to the local community to help have better outcomes for families and the youth in care. So That's kind of what that is. And oh, and the flexibility, innovation, and opportunities, that's a big thing. And I can give you some stories about some innovation and flexibility that has worked well in areas that are currently in what we call stage 2. And I'll get into that here in a minute too. And so really, yes, we're moving from a state-run child welfare system to a community-based or a local-based foster care system. All right, so this here's just kind of the map. So this is our what we call a legacy region, and these are all our regions. So we're right here in Region 4. It consists of 23 counties, and then we have Region 5, where my counterpart is. That consists of 15 counties, and then all the other regions in there. So 3 is our DFW area. 6 is where Harris County is, or Houston. 7, the little star there, that's Austin. You know, like look at us, we're state office. But so 7 is just kind of the Central Hill country. 9 is our Permian Basin, Corpus Christi, and South Padre Islands, and 11. So if you guys want to go down there, but anyways, and so it's going to shift. And here's kind of like what the new map is going to look like. So Piney Woods is where we're at in Region 4. 5 is called DBs. And as you can see, they have split 6, 7, 8, and 3 into multiple different catchment areas. A lot of that just has to deal with the size of the cities that are located. So Bear County has San Antonio. It's its own catchment area. And so Hill Country 8B, they're actually in stage 2. And so this area here is privatized at this time. They have a single source continuum contractor. 3 West is privatized at this time, except for these 3 little counties at the top, Wise, Denton, and I forget the other one, but and then 2 and 1 are also privatized at this time. So that's kind of where we're at on the map. Any questions about that? Yes.
So we have a question from Margie Clear. She's one of our volunteers.
Okay.
And she's wanting to know if this means that children who are placed in residential treatment centers will be placed more local to their county.
So that's going to be part of, that's a great question. So there's a serious lack of RTCs really in East Texas. They're all concentrated in the metroplexes, right? So or all the major metropolitan areas. So we've got a lot of RTCs, specifically in Houston and also specifically in San Antonio. And so part of when SSCC comes in and they take the contract, and we'll get a little bit more into this, but so in stage 1, they're going to have to build up network capacity, right? So there's an extreme lack and shortage of beds and places for youth to be placed, right? That's why we have a child watch crisis on our hands at DFPS. And so when an SSCC comes in, they'll work out contracts with the RTCs and that are existing currently in San Antonio, if there's any in the Dallas area. So they'll work out a contract for kids in our area to be placed there if needed. But part of their network capacity is going to try to bring in an RTC either in our area or closer. And so that's kind of part of it. So hopefully with that, at some point, maybe we'll get an RTC in our area or closer. So it's a great question. Any follow-up on that?
No, not
Okay, excellent. All right. So where are we at this month, right? So where are we at with the state? So currently we have 3 areas that are under procurement. So we're trying to work out contracts. And that's going to be our area, Piney Woods, DPs, and the Metroplex East. And so basically everybody that surrounds our area is under procurement at this time. And just kind of a little factoid right there. Right now, about a quarter of the children in state conservatorship are under an SSCC. And hopefully by next year, we'll have over 50%. Hopefully these 3 areas will have contracts signed and we'll start transitioning over to an SSCC. All right, so 3W is the longest tenured single source continuum contractor that we have in the state. So it's OCOK, Our Community, Our Kids, and they are in the on the west side of Dallas. So they've got Fort Worth and that kind of area. Anyways, they are going to be reprocuring to continue to be the single source continuum contractor, but they're going to include those 3 counties that I was pointing out, Denton, Cook, and Wise. They were initially going to split Region 3 into 3 catchment areas, but now they're not going to do that. They're going to keep it in 2. And so they're going to reprocure and include those 3 counties, hopefully in the new contract. All right, and so there are currently 4 areas that are in stage 2, and that's going to be our Panhandle or Region 1, Texoma, which is Region 2, and then we have the Metroplex West, which is 3W, and then our South Central and Hill Country 8B. So those are the 4 areas that are currently in stage 2. All right, so what are these stages, right? And as you can tell, I'll go over the timeline and then I'll kind of come back up on stage 1. So RFA is just a request for application. And so we open it up and we're like, hey, this area, Region 4, it's ready to be solicited essentially for privatization. We would like a single source continuum contractor to come in and bid on it and that sort of thing. And so that's what that RFA is. And so once we have that RFA release and it closes, we evaluate all the applicants. Once we evaluate the applicants and we select a potential provider, that's when we start negotiating and kind of working out, well, basically everything, but a lot of it is just kind of, what is expected of the SSCC and that sort of thing. And so hopefully, yeah.
So we had one of our volunteers also, if you can ask or explain a little bit more about what SSCC is.
Yes, yeah, so, so if I use any acronyms, an SSCC is a single source continuum contractor. They are basically the company or business that comes in and provides the foster care to the region. So that's what they are. All right, so theoretically, from the time that an application is submitted and agreed upon, within 4 months, a contract is signed. The RFA process for Region 4, it was opened in April of 2022. And so clearly we did not get the 4-month mark to a contract. We are still in negotiations. But once that contract is signed, we basically have what we kind of a startup stage. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Historically, it's been about the 6-month mark. And that startup phase, we're going over what we call the joint operations manual. And it's primarily in stage 1, we are dealing with placement. And so when new kids come into care, the SSCC will be responsible for placing that youth, hopefully locally. And so they'll be responsible for placing children. And then if there's any discharges for existing children in the care of DFPS, the SSCC will also be responsible for placing them. And so once we are ready to what we call go live for stage 1, once we have all the manuals sorted out, we have the training done within the department, and the SSC has the training done, what we call go live for stage 1, and that's when the SSC will actually start placing children. So there's about a 3 to 6 month window. We are just working out like all the administrative stuff and all the trainings and preparing DFPS staff on how to request placement, that sort of thing, because that work is going to shift over to the SSCC. And so there's kind of a learning curve there. And once we go live in stage 1, again, the SSC will start placing children within their network. And then during that time from stage 1 to stage 2, children that are currently in DFPS care, they will start slowly transitioning them under their SSC network. And so we have to have all the youth placed under their network before we can move into stage 2. And so as it kind of says up there, the SSCC, they support adoption recruitment, any adoption matchmaking. They work in home studies. And again, it's primarily, stage 1 is primarily placement and moving youth under what we call the SSCC network. All right.
Here's
Yes.
another question in our chat from a volunteer. So they're wondering if SSCC is going to supersede CPS for placing, or will they already have some places established for placement?
All right. So that's a great question. So also in this startup, and I should have mentioned that. So also in this startup stage between the contract to stage one, the SSC is working on their network capacity. And so they're going to be going around the region, and that's where that RTC question kind of came in too. So the SSCC will be working with local CPAs. You know, I mean, there's numerous different CPAs within Region 4, and so they will be working out contracts to have those CPAs be under their network, right? And so the SSCC is going to have to build up their capacity network. And then once, and as far as the superseding, they're working hand in hand. It's a lot of collaboration. It's really a partnership. And so, and I'm going to backtrack again, I apologize. But so during this contract, you know, we're working on the negotiations, the SSC is building up their capacity so they have places to place the children. And we won't move to stage one until they are ready. So if they're having a hard time building up their network capacity to have children placed under their network, then this timeline is going to be shifted out. Now, if they're super proactive and there's a lot of, you know, CPAs and RTCs and, you know, any psych hospitals, et cetera, you know, wherever children are placed, if they're extremely proactive and you know, they build up their network quickly, then they'll be ready quicker and we'll move into stage one quicker. So moving from stage to stage, a lot of it's going to be based on readiness. Are we ready to move on to the next stage? So great question. So again, in stage one, and as we move to stage two, again, we are moving all the children. Really, it's just a computer transfer, right? But yeah, so they're going to be moving children under their network. And once we get all the children under their network and they're ready, we'll go ahead and start moving towards stage two. And stage two, that's the big shift for DFPS. That's when the case management portion, which is, you know, all your conservatorship workers, your adoption workers, PAL workers, FGDM staff, that's where DFPS, that's where all that work will shift over to the SSCC. So in stage one, the primary responsibilities that are shifted from DFPS over to the SSCC, it's going to be your child placement unit, because again, the SSCC, once they are ready, they will be the ones in charge of placing the youth. And then also FAD. And so I know the department, foster to adopt, I know they go out and they recruit, you know, foster homes, and then they license them. And so DFPS is no longer going to be doing that. They're trying to get out of the, basically the CPA side of it for them. And so they are, when they come in, part of DFPS's responsibility before we get into stage two, we'll be talking with all their FAD homes and seeing if they want to transition over to a CPA. And so the foster to adopt side of it is also affected in stage one. Yes, ma'am.
Michael, you said currently in our region, we're still in negotiating contracts.
Yes.
So we don't have a contractor for our area yet.
No, not yet.
Not confirmed.
Not confirmed. Yeah. We need the signature on the dotted line first. So.
Right. And so once that happens and they start their recruitment efforts, and you talk about, we have, you know, a number of different child placing agencies in our region. I mean, we've got Buckner and Arrow and Methodist. And so will they have to contract individually with those agencies?
Yes.
And if those agencies choose not to,
it's going to slow it down. And so hopefully whoever is awarded the contract, so part of it is that when they submit their request for an application, is they're going to put down on how they're going to be successful. And part of that, you know, being successful is building up that capacity. And so hopefully whoever is awarded that contract has a good relationship with the other CPAs and all the other just all the other placing agencies within the region, to where hopefully that's not an issue. So, because I know in the past we've had other bidders and stuff, and that kind of came down to it. There was some concern about whether or not the other areas would be able to contract with that existing SSCC. And so sometimes that plays a factor into it.
And so will they contract, so will our Piney Woods contractor, will they contract with, you know, the 10 RTCs that we've got kids in Houston? Or I know the goal is to maintain kids in our region, in our area, but we know our kids and that's not always possible. And we don't have the facilities to meet their needs here.
That's true.
And so will they have to contract with each RTC individually?
Yes, they would have to. Yeah, unless those RTCs are part of a parent company or something like that, you know, they would have to basically, try to get a contract with them. And in the beginning, it's extremely difficult because, you know, the SSCCs are inheriting the existing DFPS, right? And so they are tasked with the responsibility of building up that network capacity. And part of when you get to stage 3 and stuff, they've got performance measures and everything. And part of that performance measure, one of them is proximity. How close are the children to where they're originally from, right? And so, because right now we have kids that are removed in Smith County and they're placed out in Kerrville, or they're placed down in San Antonio, or they're placed in Houston. I mean,
Or Arkansas.
in Arkansas. So I mean, there's a lot of child specific contracts that go out of state, right? And a lot of that is because we don't have the network yet in our area. And so one of the goals is for going to community-based care is that there is somebody that is focused specifically on that area to build up capacity that'll meet the needs of the youth and the families that are within that area. And so, and that's just going to take time. So in the very beginning, they're going to have to contract with, you know, RTCs that are well out of their network and not within their proximity, but hopefully over time, they're going to be able to build up that network in their area. So, yes, ma'am.
If they couldn't have a contract with an RTC in Houston, let's say, would the children from Piney Woods that are down there be placed somewhere else?
So they, from my understanding, I'm not 100% sure, but from my understanding is yes, that if they are not able to secure a contract, then yes, they would have to, if they secured a contract with somebody else, they would then, you know, place the children with somebody under their contract.
So they get traumatized.
So, yeah, but yeah, and that's
That's.
And, you know, and again, I mean, it's tough, but, you know, I'm pretty confident, and we're not going to know until the contract's signed, until we move. I mean, it's just, right now, it's just kind of where we're at.
Is there a target date to get this contract signed?
It was, the target date was September 2022. I mean, and so we're a little behind that. And I was just going to provide an update at the end. No problem telling you now, but hopefully, you know, I know that negotiations are ongoing. There are some sticking points. They've worked through a majority of them, and we're going to be setting up some face-to-faces and hopefully kind of speed this along. And a lot of it's just, can we overcome those sticking points? And it's not just DFPS and, you know, the potential SSCC that are negotiations. I mean, you've got the legislative budget board that's going on. You've got, you know, the commissioner that's involved. You've got, you know, finance. You've got legislators. You've got oversight committees that are involved. And so there's just a lot of people that are involved, you know, during these negotiations. So, I mean, I'm hoping it's soon. Yes, ma'am.
So about 4 years ago, I moved from Midland, Texas, Permian region. And this was a really hot topic because it was just going through the legislation. And so there was a lot of back and forth about why would we want this? Could you, for everyone else, because I remember the arguments from back then, give a real quick explanation of why we're changing from community-based care, why we think that that's going to be in the long run. I know that this is really rocky right now, but in the long run, what benefits might we see or what we're hoping to see?
So that's a great question. And I've kind of touched on that throughout the presentation, but the primary reason is to just have better outcomes for youth and family. Because right now, through the state care system, I mean, we've got kids that are constantly traumatized because they're placed continuously, right? I mean, we all know those youth that have had 20, 25, 30 plus placements. They can't ever seem to settle in somewhere, right? And so, and really when it comes to foster care, one size doesn't fit all, right? And so what they're trying to do is trying to make it more localized because Region 4 knows Region 4 best, right? What works in Dallas or doesn't work in Dallas may or may not work here. And so the goal is to one, keep kids closer to home, right? So that's one of the big ones. They have proximity, right? So they want to try to keep kids within about 50 miles from where they're originally from. And it's extremely difficult because we're rural, right? I mean, you've got two big cities of Tyler and you've got Longview and I guess you can include Texarkana way up there too, but we just don't have a lot of, big areas and it's hard to keep them closed. But that's one of the goals is to hopefully have close proximity, keep youth closer to where they're originally from. Ideally try to keep them in the same school system, that sort of thing. In addition to that, another one of the goals is to keep sibling groups together. And so, and then also going to an SSCC, they can have what's called, they're a little bit, they're able to be more innovative and a little bit more flexible with some of the decisions. So for example, over in Region 3, they had a youth that was constantly in child watch, would get placed, would sabotage the placement, be back in child watch within about a week. And then it was just a big circle and it continuously happened. Well, after, I don't know if it was CASA or if it was CPS, but after sitting down and talking with this youth, they learned that this youth wanted to be placed with an uncle. Well, the issue with the uncle is the uncle had a difficult time having a stable living environment. So they were constantly bouncing from place to place, constantly, sometimes in a car. And so DFPS can't recommend that, right? Because uncle isn't stable. Well, the SSCC being able to be a little bit more flexible and innovative, instead of saying, all right, well, no, you can't go with uncle because they can't hold down a house. The SSCC realized that it was traumatizing to the youth. And not only was it traumatizing to the youth, they were constantly getting placed and they're getting in trouble. And so what they did is they worked with the uncle, and the SSCC was actually able to pay for rent for about, I don't know if it's 6 months or up to a year, but they paid rent for 6 months to provide this uncle with a stable living environment. That youth went in and lived with the uncle. And then in addition to that, they were able to help provide some respite care kind of during the day. And it was actually successful. The youth didn't come back in and stayed with the uncle. And so that's some of the, like, DFPS can't do that. DFPS can't come out and say, hey, we'll pay rent for you for 6 months so you can get stable and the youth live in there. So those are that's just one small example for just being innovative and flexible. And so hopefully, with that, youth will be able to stay closer to home. We'll have less, recidivism for kids coming into care. And child watch is a huge thing, right? And so hopefully that's another one of the goals is to all but eliminate child watch for them. So I hope that answers your question. And yes, it's a sticking point with DFPS staff and external stakeholders and that sort of thing. So yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're calling it community-based care.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is the SSCC going to be based in the community already?
Yes, they have to have, in order for that, they have to have some sort of established relationship within the community.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not going to be, somebody from New York coming in here trying to run it. So
good.
Yeah, so it's going to be somebody that's local and at least has some sort of established relationships within the area. So great question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, any other questions? Great questions.
We do have a couple here.
Okay.
Let's see. So we have more volunteers asking about if there are any existing residential treatment centers or any other type of facilities here in Piney Woods that might have the capacity to take over the number of cases here.
I don't think we have any, and so unfortunately, no, we don't. I know there's some people that are trying to get RTCs built, but it's easy we can shut down an RTC in a day, but it takes 18 to 24 months to get one up and running.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like when you go to the store and they take your money real quick, but it takes forever to get reimbursed. Kind of the same thing, but just a lot longer. You said there was a couple?
One was wanting kind of to understand a little bit more between, the terms between foster placements and residential treatment center. Is that going to be any different, that terminology, once a contract takes over?
Yeah, so a lot of that is, and that's kind of towards the end of the slide as far as, how does that affect external stakeholders? But as far as like in-house for DFPS, I don't know how it's I don't know if any of the terminology is going to change. I mean, I know like position titles are going to change. I know in some areas, somebody receiving a placement request for DFPS, it goes to the child placement unit. I know in one of the SSCCs, they just call them just placement, one's called an intake specialist. And so some of the job titles might change, but as far as I know, the process and their forms might be different. Hopefully there's less paperwork with them because there's way too much with CPS now. But again, that's going to be specific to the contractor when they come in. So. Any others?
Not at the moment.
All
I'll
right.
let you know. Thank you.
All right, no problem. So again, in stage one, the primary responsibility is placement and building up their network capacity. So in stage two for DFPS, again, this is when the biggest transition is going to happen. So the case management skills, conservatorship work, the foster care workers, they're going to all be moving over to the SSCC. That also includes kinship. So any of our kinship homes, those kinship workers are going to move over, that sort of thing. And then in stage three, it's just kind of maintaining. There's some incentives and disincentives and stuff for them making. So really based on their performance, there can be incentives and disincentives in stage three. I don't know what that really looks like because we have yet to have an area go into stage three. So we have 4 in stage 2 and 3 that are just hoping to get there. So so that 18-month timeline from 2 to 3 it's like infinity at the moment. Hopefully we can shorten that up, but all right. So I'll just kind of, again, stage 1, again, is placement, care coordination, some small things like PAL classes and services. They'll be responsible for keeping up with that. That's some of the stuff in stage 1. Adoption recruitment's 1. Licensing kinship homes, that's going to be another responsibility that transitions over to the SSC in stage 1. So, and ICPC homes. But yeah, so again, at the bottom, really, we're hoping for it to be more of a partnership between DFPS and the SSCC. And that's kind of part of my responsibilities is to help kind of bridge that gap because like you were saying over the Permian Basin, I mean, there's, just a lot of bad blood. People don't want it to happen. People are very anti-change, right? And this is a huge shift from the norm. And so my role is working with both DFPS and SSCC, hoping to kind of bridge that gap and everything. So, all right, stage 2 is the case management, so caseworker visits. In stage 1, as far as like court cases or when it goes to court, it's going to kind of be status quo. The caseworkers are going to continue to go to courts. The SSCC might, if requested or asked, they may come to the court hearings to start being introduced to, local jurisdictions and judges and attorneys, that sort of thing. So one thing that could change for external stakeholders that's also going to change is have a lot of you guys been in family group conference meetings or permanency conference meetings?
Yeah.
Okay, that may or may not happen with the SSCC. So their meeting structure could be different. And I don't really have any examples, and I don't know if they're going to continue with family group conferences or if they make that shift over to the collaborative family engagement, the CFEs that some of the local CASAs are doing or some CASAs are doing in other areas. I know they're doing it like Angelina County, Jefferson County, or some of the ones that are doing collaborative family engagement meetings.
We start training here in February.
Okay, so and that could be the shift, right? So, all right, and And so at this time, under case management, that's when they're developing the child plans, family plans of service. That's all going to be handled now by the SSCC because that work has transitioned over. Again, just monitoring the services, court-related duties, and then just anything else that is under case management is going to shift over to the SSCC. So, and then again, it's here's the incentives and remedies or whatever once we get into stage 3. So, all right, and so biggest thing why we're here is just kind of how does this change going to affect external stakeholders, and just kind of what I mentioned, right? So we have meetings and stuff are going to look different. You know, I mean, your role as being an advocate for children. Are we all CASA in here, or do we have some other?
There are quite a few. There's an ad litem attorney here.
Okay.
There's also on Zoom is other attorneys.
Okay.
Maybe a judge. Okay. And also child placing agencies.
Okay. Yeah. So really, I mean, you guys are going to continue to be, you know, play a vital role in the system. And, you know, like with CASA and stuff, you'll continue to go to court. And really what's going to change is, you know, who to contact, you know, some like phone numbers going to change, who you reach out to. You know, you may not reach out to DFPS, you might have to reach out to a local office, that sort of thing. And hopefully the goal is that when we make that transition, it's not going to be like the SSCC is going to have existing, you know, DFPS and CPS workers move over with them is what the goal is. So they're not going to be hiring a whole bunch of new people. So the goal is to, you know, have them come over and continue to work their cases and continue to work with the families that they've established relationships with. And so, but yeah, again, the meetings are going to be, they could look a little bit different, and then points of contact could be a little bit different. So, but as an ad litem and stuff, you'll continue to work with CPI. You know, they'll continue to remain under DFPS, but you'll continue to work with CPI as far as affidavits and granting removals, that sort of thing. And then, so really the goal is that when we shift over that, you know, the process doesn't necessarily change, right? Like, you know, hopefully when we transition to stage 2, that workers and supervisors and units are going to transition over, and they're going to continue to work the cases, and they'll continue to reach out to you. And so it'll be, you know, the familiar face. It's just going to be maybe slightly different on how some things are handled, but ultimately the goal is the same, right? It's to provide families and youth with the best outcome possible, provide, you know, hopefully healing to the youth that have been traumatized, and just provide some resources and everything for families to, you know, provide safe living environment for their kiddos. So.
Michael, will this affect our contractors that like our counselors and therapists, or the services that are provided to parents in our areas? Will this affect those resources?
Well, they contract with the state, and so that's going to be kind of, you know, with the purchase client services and everything. Again, that's going to be part of the SSC, right? They're going to have to go out and they're going to hopefully recruit and sign contracts with, you know, existing service providers, but also build up the capacity to have more service providers. You know, and the state's pretty rigid, right? I mean, they, you know, family plans of service are pretty identical. And I know they've tried to get away from that, but they're pretty systematic when it comes to what their family plans of service look like. And hopefully with an SSCC, they can become much more individualized, and they can directly help the family with exactly whatever it is that they need. And we're not just providing counseling to everybody. We're not providing parenting classes to everybody. And they can get extremely, you know, a lot more specific with what services they need. And so as far as that, again, the SSCC is going to have to contract with local service providers. And so it could change. Hopefully, you know, they'll be able to utilize those that are currently signed with the state, and hopefully bring in more service providers as well. Because I know there's an extreme lack of counselors, psychologists, a lot of therapists are needed. And so, I mean, just overall, I mean, the whole system itself is just in dire need. I mean, we're short CASA workers, we're short social workers, we're short, psychologists. I mean, you name it. I mean, mental health facilities, we're short in, services for juvenile, we're short in. I mean, it's a systemic problem, right? And it's not just CPS, but that's one of the goals of community-based care. And I know it seems kind of far-fetched, but how it was going wasn't exactly working to the best of its ability, right? And so now hopefully we can get more localized and we can have somebody that's specific on a certain area. And who knows, I mean, we could have 12 to 16 different providers providing community-based care and foster services. And maybe one or multiple of those will be extremely successful. And, I like having 16 chances of being successful compared to the one that we know hasn't been working to its fullest potential. So, but yes.
We have somebody wondering how public the contracts will be and what's the level of transparency between that and the public.
So from my understanding, it's, I think they have to post it all.
Okay.
Being public. So if you go to any of the existing SSCCs, I think they have to post all that. So, but don't quote me on that. But I mean, them being public provider and being a nonprofit, they have to, like financials and stuff. I mean, all that stuff's going to be online. So, yeah.
But ours that is in negotiation won't be public until it's
Correct. Till it's signed.
everything's solidified.
Yep. So we're just in a holding pattern. So, and I mean, I'd love for a contract to be signed today or tomorrow, but I mean, we've been saying now for months, like, hopefully soon. And so, I mean, it's frustrating. So, so again, so we're just between the bidder and DFPS right now, we're just working on negotiations. Like I said, we're trying to hopefully set up some face-to-face interviews, and we're going to bring everybody together. I think it's a lot more productive if we're face-to-face than, Zoom or phone calls, that sort of thing.
Is there just one bidder?
So we boiled it down to one, and so we're trying to finalize it now. Yes, ma'am. So, and then again, our area is going to include all 23 counties. I know that there's some rumors floating out there that, at least from the DFPS side, that they were going to split us up and that, they're only going to take X amount of counties from Region 4 but the bid is to take all 23 counties that are originally in Region 4, and same with Region 5. So those 15 counties, they're all included as well. So, I know you guys have been asking questions throughout, and I appreciate it. Hopefully it's been helpful. Are there any other questions or any clarification? Yes, ma'am.
So the process is going to be, can you explain this? It's probably obvious, but
You're okay.
break it down. So starting from the very beginning, the report is made to DFPS, then investigation will take place by DFPS.
Yes, ma'am.
And if there is a removal, then DFPS will go to hand over the situation.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so really the process is going to be the same, right? So when a report's made, they call in statewide intake, they, take the report and then they'll send it out to, the appropriate county. And then CPI is going to continue to do what they're doing. They're going to conduct their investigation. And then if a removal is warranted, then they'll reach out to the SSCC provider. It could be an email, it could be a phone call. It's just really kind of whatever they work out. So I know some places they have to send an email and they have to make a call within like 4 or an hour, I think. They have to call the placement unit within an hour once a removal is like warranted. And so really that's going to be where it starts to get different, right? So once a removal is granted, who they contact and where they send in the paperwork is going to be a little bit different. Because right now they reach out to our child placement unit and then they take care of it from there. And so that's where that shift will start. And then, and so once it gets over to the SSCC, and they'll be responsible for finding placement. And then if they find placement relatively quickly, then CPI is going to go ahead and place the child. If it takes longer than a certain amount of time, then the SSCC will actually come in and they'll pick up the youth or multiple youth, and then once they do find placement, they'll place them.
But they won't pick the child up. I mean, that's still gonna be on the
Yes and no. So a lot of it's just gonna, and I know it's gonna depend. So right now, the way that it works is it's really all on CPI, right? So CPI, when I was an investigator, I mean, I was responsible for picking up the youth, bringing them back to the office, and then once placement was found, I would then go to placement. A lot of it's going to be dependent on what the SSCC wants to do. How quickly do they want to get involved when a removal is granted?
Gotcha.
They could go out. Like there's a possibility that they might want to go out. You know, maybe they have a team that's dedicated specific for children that come into care. You know, because the kids are affected by it. There's a lot of trauma when kids are removed. And so, you know, the SSCC might want to get involved early and start that healing process quickly. Okay. They could just hold back and get involved, you know, whenever they're supposed to, I guess you could say, just so. But hopefully the SSCC will, you know, get involved as quickly as possible and start that. But again, a lot of it's just going to kind of come down to the partnership between the local DFPS folks and the SSCC. And so hopefully, you know, because I'll be involved with that too. And hopefully I'll be able to kind of build those relationships. I mean, I have a pretty good relationship with DFPS. And then, you know, once an SSCC is announced, you know, I'll build a relationship with them and hopefully I can just be that conduit and work through any issues that might arise. But yes, ma'am.
So are they going to have, once the SSCC is formed and set to go, are they going to have local offices? Because we have 23 counties. So.
Correct. So, and that's a question that DFPS staff have too. And that's just we don't know until they come in and how they want to run. Because right now in all these counties, you know, there's a DFPS or there's a local office in all the counties for the most part, right? I don't think there's one in some of the tinier ones like maybe Red River or Delta, but yeah, they might just have centralized just kind of throughout the region. Because right now, a lot of the workers are mobile, you know, so they'll probably, if I had to guess, they'll continue with that, allow the workers to be mobile, and they might just kind of have some centralized locations or maybe a couple of satellite offices where they can come in and work in a cubicle or something like that. You know, because right now the state contracts out in some cases some pretty large buildings. And so that could be also another cost saving metric for SSCCs coming in, is not having to pay rent on ginormous buildings that only have half capacity. So, but yeah, so that's hopefully, I mean, they'll have to have them. I mean, they're not going to have just one place in Tyler and expect people from Texarkana to come down and that sort of thing. But if I had to guess, they'll definitely have some main offices and probably some satellite offices. So yeah, that's a good question. Yes.
We have a couple on the chat.
Okay.
So somebody is wondering about the different types of SSCC providers. Will they mostly be faith-based? Is that an option? What are some different types of?
Yeah, so I know that, so St. Francis, I think that their parent company is actually from like Kansas or something like that, and they're in the Panhandle. You've got Belong that I think is faith-based, belongs in Central Hill Country. And then you've got Two Engaged, and then you have Our Community, Our Kids. But yeah, and St. Francis is obviously in the name, but yeah, they're faith-based as well. So, so really, yeah, it's just going to kind of depend on the culture of the SSCC.
Okay.
So yeah.
And there's also somebody that's kind of curious about what systems are in place for maybe the grandfathering people inside and outside of regions, depending on the situation.
Yep, that's a great, yeah. So there's always going to be exceptions, right? And so the goal is to have, you know, the youth from our area stay in our area. But once the transition happens, you know, we might have a youth that's placed with family that is maybe from region 11 or whatever. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to take them out. And so, and if that youth, say, for example, in region 11, say they had a sibling, you know, and we're in an SCC environment now, I mean, the SSCC will allow that child to come and be with siblings, because that's what it is, right? It's just trying to stay with family. And so, yeah, I mean, there's definitely exceptions for capacity. So just when they build up their capacity, it's not just for Region 4 kids. Ideally, that's how we want it to be, but there's always those exceptions, right? And so that's just an example. So if there's a child that has a, even if they're a Region 4 child and they have a, half sibling out there that's removed, then, from a different area, they can definitely come and stay with their sibling. Good question.
Okay, and then one more. So who is holding the SSCCs accountable? Just making sure that they adhere to, foster care bill of rights and things like that.
DFPS. So DFPS is still involved. So when the kids are removed, they're still under DFPS care. So DFPS is technically over it. DFPS is going to be, looking at the performance measures and making sure that the SSCC is doing what they're supposed to be doing. If they're not, then they'll be put on a kind of a plan to help rectify some of the concerns or issues, that sort of thing. But DFPS is involved, and it's not just DFPS. I mean, you've got legislative oversight, there's an oversight committee that is looking at specifically just CBC and its implementation. We have foster care litigation that's still going on. And so that's a big one. There's a foster care litigation hearing this Friday with Judge Jacks. And so that's, so that also plays a role in it as well. So, but yeah, DFPS is definitely involved too. So yeah, good question.
I have a question, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have had an incredible amount of turnover in our conservatorship units.
Yep.
With our CPS caseworkers in all of our counties. And, we keep hearing they're not going to have a job but I don't know that that's what has affected it, but can you talk a little bit from your perspective on the stability of CPS between now and then?
Yeah.
Until the contract is negotiated?
So right now it's definitely, it's a rocky time, right? And so we don't know, it's hard to be as transparent as possible when we're under procurement, right? Because we can't talk about it, which is unfortunate because I know that the potential bidder, they want to get out, they want to talk about what their mission statement is, what their vision is, what they want to do, what are their ideas for community-based care. And as far as jobs and positions, I mean, the SSCC wants, workers and supervisors and program directors, and they want them to move over, right? Because they have the knowledge, they have the experience, they have the relationships already established with the families and the youth. And so right now, I'm putting out rumor fires all the time. And a lot of that's just because right now there's kind of that void and workers and staff are just filling that void with rumors. Now, as far as this is my own personal opinion. I think that regardless if we are with the state or SSCC or some other aspect of foster care, this job within itself is always going to have a high turnover rate, right? There's a lot of trauma that workers experience. And it's a very difficult job. I mean, as a worker, I mean, you see some pretty horrific things, you experience some horrific things, and just what these kids go through, what families go through, it's very traumatizing. And so just by the nature of the job, there's always going to be a higher turnover rate. But how do we get that to be, how can we stabilize the workforce as much as possible? Because not only, placing children in multiple locations, going through numerous workers is also traumatizing, right? And so that's always been a goal of DFPS, and I'm sure that's going to be a goal moving on to the SSCC, is just trying to have a stable worker as well. But no, the SSCCs want workers to come over. They have the relationships, they have the knowledge, and I mean, it's extremely difficult to hire somebody and train them and get them up to speed, and so. But that also being said, I mean, if you're a crappy worker, the SSCC is not going to want you. So, I mean, no, I'm serious. I mean, they're bad caseworkers. And so the SSCC is, So there's a lot that goes into it, right? But I mean, if you're proactive, you're a good worker, and you're optimistic and, you know, not a negative Nancy all the time towards CBC, then, you know, the SSC wants you to come over. So they want it, they want that continuity with the cases. So, yes, ma'am.
We talk about RTCs and foster homes, and we all know that the foster network is very, very small. Is the desire, the goals, however you want to say it, to have less RTCs and more fosters? And is there a bona fide effort for that to be ultimately the end? Foster homes, no RTCs.
Yeah. I would assume so, right? I mean, I don't think we could ever get away from RTCs. I mean, just because we've got youth that have, excuse me, that substance abuse issues, psychological issues, and you know, so I don't think we can ever fully get away from RTCs. But you know, I mean, the service levels and levels of care, I mean, that's kind of a contentious thing. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is trying to give the youth, you know, the services and the help that they need to hopefully, and I'll just use CPS terms, you know, decrease their levels to where they're able to be placed in a foster home or placed with family. And that's always going to be the end goal, right? Is to try to, first and foremost, get youth placed back with their parents or whatever their home was. And then secondary to that's going to be placed with family members. So, but yeah, I would assume that trying to transition away from RTCs and into a more foster-like or family-like setting is going to be one of the goals. I mean, it is now, and I don't see that changing. Excellent. Just a couple more slides. Okay. No, I really do have a couple more, but it's nothing to. But no, so this is just for more information. Here's a couple of websites. I know it's all over the place. You can scan our beautiful QR code here. That's got our logo in the middle, and it'll just take you to this top one here. But yeah, so there's a lot of information. If you want to learn more about the SSCCs that are currently operating, you know, if St. Francis to engage, OCOK or belong, they'll be on our webpage, and you can learn a little bit more. I mean, every SSCC is a little bit different. And, you know, the one that comes in for us, they'll have a different plan, and it'll be a plan that's specific to our region. So, and then just because you haven't seen enough of my face, here's one more. This is my contact information. This is my counterpart, Joni Out. She's in Region 5. So she and I are going to be working hand in hand and closely, and so that sort of thing. But
I have a question about Region 5.
okay.
It looked like that Harris County was kind of stretching over a little bit. So do you know what counties are going to be in Region 5?
So it's going to be all of the ones that are currently in Region 5 now. So let me try to get over real quick to the map.
Yeah, because East Texas to me is
yeah, so you've got
from
here's
left
Walker
into
County.
Beaumont.
Yeah, you've got Walker, Montgomery County. I don't know that county. I don't know that county. But yeah, so we've got Jefferson and Orange. You've got
you're good.
yeah, San Jacinto, Polk County.
Okay.
So these, and then we've got Trinity County, Houston County is here, and so, but yeah, so we're not
So
going to
it
get
is,
into
okay.
Harrison County.
The way the line was drawn was confusing me, and you said
Yeah.
Harris County, and I'm like,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
so Harris County's all by itself.
Mhm.
So just kind of like Bear County.
So
is.
now I see it goes around.
Yep. And so whenever Region 6 goes, or if, you know, there's an unsolicited process. So at the last legislative session, they opened up 3 East, 4, 5, and 9 to go this route, right? And as I stated, there's only 3. So when the RFA process was released for Region 9, there weren't any bidders. And so that left, you know, so what it is that, you know, the legislature allotted money for these areas to go community-based care. Well, now there's a pool of money for a 4th area to go, you know, to have an SSCC. And so there's also what's called an unsolicited process. And so if any of these areas, 6, 7, 10, really it's just kind of right here, but if any of these areas, if there's an SSCC that is willing to go in or a provider that's willing to go in, they can apply for those certain areas. And that's where the unsolicited part. So they were actively being recruited to go privatized, but if there's a CPA or somebody that wants to take that on, they can apply for it. So.
How long are the contracts?
So the one for OCOK was 10 years. And so there's been talk that they might move it down to 5. 10 years is a long time. And so they might go to 5, but it's, so like right now, 3 West is basically just renegotiating their contract. So, and it's gonna, Denton, Cook, and Wise counties are gonna hopefully go under that procurement, or they will go under that procurement. So that's gonna be part of the new contracts that those 3 counties are included.
How will community stakeholders be notified? How will we know when the contract is?
So hopefully, the way that it's gonna work is once a contract is signed, we're gonna let the RD in regions 4. Well, see, in 4 and 5 are a little bit different, right? Because we're administratively attached too, right? And so there's going to be some probably separation issues between the 2 regions, but no. So we're going to reach out to DFPS local leaders. We'll tell them that a contract's been signed, and then they'll make the announcement to the DFPS staff. And then from there, I have a lot of emails for a lot of the local CASAs, CACs. I do have some attorneys. But I'll send out an email or something like that, and hopefully, let's see, it'll also be announced like on our DFPS website. I know we've got some, contract award announcements that'll come out. But yeah, really it's going to be hopefully through word of mouth, and I have contact information. I will send it out when I'm able to, hopefully as quickly as possible, so you guys are well aware too. So, yes.
So we have a volunteer who's wondering if in those links that you provided earlier, if there's anything in those that might provide like a compare and contrast between what exists now and the SSCCs in terms of like responsibilities and roles.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, I can't think of anything that's posted. A lot of what I went over are just kind of the differences. And again, every SSCC is going to be a little bit different, on how they want to handle certain situations. Every case is unique, but hopefully, they won't have the cookie cutter plans or anything like that. And they'll be a little bit more individualized. But so, and again, on our website, we have, they're called rider reports. I think it's Rider 15, and they go through and they talk about and they highlight. And they highlight things that are going well. They talk about performances, and then I think actually they'll compare and contrast how it is compared to what we call legacy areas. Ones that are legacy is DFPS areas. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, I answered my own question. So there we go. All right.
When that happens.
So yeah, go to the website. I can put it back up in. But yeah, there's a lot of information, especially the Rider 15s. Yeah.
The SSCCs that are in for the regions that have them right now, how is it going?
Well, if you listen to DFPS staff, it's going awful. But if you actually read the reports and you actually read and looked at everything that was going on, it's going pretty well. So again, and I'm going to go back to this, the SSCC is not a magic wand, right? They are inheriting the existing system, which is suffering, right? And so it's going to take them time to build up their capacity, build up the resources, and hopefully the further we get along, the better those statistics are going to improve. And so back to that question is, it's going pretty well, right? I know they've got some statistics where they want kids a certain amount of kids placed within local regions and PAL classes and completions, and they're not perfect, but it's going better than what DFPS staff will tell you. So, but yeah, I just encourage you to read those reports. Had I thought about it, I guess I could have provided an example on that, but the SSCC is going to be held to some of the same accountability that foster care litigation is holding DFPS, so they're not separated from that. So I know, like, for example, caseloads, like conservatorship workers can only have, I think was it 17.6 or something like that, cases, right? And so the SSCC is, and by cases that includes children and parents and stuff, but the SSCC is going to be held to that same standard. So yeah, so whatever comes out of the foster care litigation, and the SSCC is going to have to adhere to those as well. So yeah, any other questions?
Will they take over FBSS services too?
At this time, no.
That's gonna stay with CPS.
At this time.
Investigations.
Invest in FBSS. Yep, they're the two major departments. So, but yeah, as far as FBSS at this time, it's going to remain with DFPS. In the future, depending how this goes, they may include FBSS, and I know there's some bills out there that are trying to pilot FBSS being privatized. So, and a lot of it, again, is going to be based on readiness. We're not going to jump the gun. We're going to make sure that the SSCC is ready to move on to the next part on the timeline. Because it's written in law. I mean, this is the direction that the state of Texas has to go, and we want it to be successful. I mean, I want it to be successful. I mean, I think that, our youth and our families deserve for us to be successful, because they're the ones that are on the receiving end of it. And we need our youth to receive the help that they need and receive the healing that they need, and also the families to receive, the help and healing processes that they need as well. But any other questions, concerns, comments, criticisms? Pretty open.
We need your cookie recipe.
Yeah. I'll get back to you on that.
I have a question.
Was it Sam's Club? No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. I have no idea.
You may have answered this and went over my head, I don't know, but as far as the team of people that you work with, how many, there's you obviously, that goes in and evaluates if that, once a contract signed, that SCC is ready to go to phase one?
So I'm the only person in my office that's local, right? And so my boss, she's in Austin, and then my counterparts in Region 5. In our community, our office is 22 people. So we have 22 people in our office. And before we determine on whether or not they're ready for the next stage, we'll sit down with the SSCC. I'll be involved. My office will be involved. DFPS will be involved. And so it's just kind of a collaborative decision on when we're ready to move on. And there's a lot more behind the scenes too. You've got IT. We got to make sure that their, IT structure is up and able to handle it. And I know right now there's a huge push for interoperability, because SSCCs are still using Impact, and it's, antiquated, and they're trying to improve that process. And then SSCCs have their own operating system. And so right now they're really trying to solve that interoperability aspect too. But yeah, so it's just kind of a group decision between the SSCC and DFPS in our office. And so we're kind of the neutral people in the middle, and, we're going to be unbiased each way. So
You're the referee.
yeah, I do referee actually. So yeah, soccer.
Oh.
So I do. Yeah.
He is really a ref.
I am. Yeah. So so I've refereed at Lindsay Park or TSA for about, I guess, going on 10 years now. And then I recertified to do high school again. My oldest son, he's 17. And he's graduating this year. And anyways, for a 17-year-old, he makes pretty good money refereeing high school soccer games. And so he and I do it together. So, yeah.
One more question.
Yeah, no, you're good.
So our court orders provide us access to the children and case information. Will the contractors that are overseeing the case management, will there be any hiccup in those? Because like the ad litem's have access also.
Yeah, so if it's court ordered, they have to abide by court orders. So they won't be able to supersede that or anything like that. Really, you know, how it's operating now as far as court orders and having access, that should all stay the same. So, yep. Should. Well, I mean, yeah, again, it comes down to court orders, right?
Right.
So, I mean, if there's, you know, workers and stuff that are, you know, sharing information that they're not supposed to be or without a court order, I mean, that's where, you know, I guess that level could change. But I mean, if it's court ordered or if it's in policy, I mean, the SSCC still has to abide by all of that. And especially if it's foster care litigation, I mean, they really have to abide by it, you know. But yeah. I mean, they're not going to come in and close you guys off. I mean, they want to build a working relationship and they want to, you know, foster that relationship much more deeply than probably what you already have now with DFPS. So again, it's all about that community aspect. And, you know, we're all part of the community and we're all here, you know, hoping, you know, we're here for the best interests of children and for families. And they really want to, you know, expand that and expound on it. It's a group effort. So
Takes a village.
it does, yes. So
And those other areas that have already implemented this, is there one that's just doing phenomenal? Or that, you know, could be like the guide?
well, I've only been, so I wasn't, when I came on board, Region 3 West, 1 and 2 were already in stage 2, and they were just kind of like, just, you know, what's going well, what do we need to work on? And so when I got on, Belong was transitioning from stage 1 to stage 2. And from what I heard, Belong just did an awesome job. They were really well prepared. They did a great job with the community. And that's, you know, but they're also number 4, you know, and so I mean, I don't know how many people have children, but the more children you have, the easier they get. So, so it could be kind of the same thing. So like with OCOK, it took us a very long time to get from startup to even to stage 1 and then even to stage 2, but you know, they were the first one to go. And so it's just kind of trial and error. And now as we've gone through 4, and now with the implementation of our office, it's gone really smoothly, but we've been able to kind of work out those kinks and to really kind of streamline the process. And so, I mean, that timeline that I showed you from contract to startup, I mean, it was almost 2 years from stage 1 to stage 2, and now we've shortened it down to almost 6 months. So, but again, that's just the process of, you know, trial and errors and implementing it across now 4. So from what I heard, Belong went the most smooth, but I think that just kind of comes back to just
They knew what not to do.
exactly. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put it. So any other questions from the chat?
No, not at the moment.
All right.
But now is the time, everybody. If you have a question, utilize the chat box.
Absolutely.
Okay, we do have one. So
All right.
what will happen if placements that are outside of the region, say like one region has already begun utilizing an SSCC, and then there's another region that has not signed a contract yet? What will that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of it, and that's one thing that they're trying to work out because, you know, and it kind of depends where did the case originate from? Did it come from an SSCC area or did it come from a legacy region? And so a lot of that though is that if you're in a legacy region, when they start building up their capacity, they're going to really try to cut down on how many out of region kids are placed in that SSCC, so the SSCC can kind of build up their capacity, right? But again, it comes down to those exceptions, right? I mean, it's not just completely shut off because we'll bring up the RTC. So if Bear County went SSCC and they have 90% of the RTCs, they can't just completely shut it down and say no other kids because it's part of our capacity building. There's going to be those exceptions, and so they'll continue to receive, youth from legacy areas. But yes, that is, and I'll just, that's one that we're trying to work out, is trying to get out the contact information. So if you're in a legacy region and you're trying to place in, say, region 2 or reach family in region 2, who's that point of contact? And so they're still trying to kind of sort that out on the best way to get information out there, because, and it kind of comes down to that interoperability. As a caseworker, you can get an impact and you can quickly search who's in that area and who you need to contact. Well, SSCCs have their own operating system when it comes down to the personnel. So that's one thing they're trying to work on, but a lot of it is just, but with our team and CBCAs, I've had folks call me from legacy regions, say, hey, who do I need to contact in region 1 or region 2? And then I can put them in contact with the CBCA, or I can try to pull up their contact information. And they're trying to post that information up on the internet or on the intranet so they can have access to it as well. So, but when you're in the field, everything's in a hurry, and, but yeah, so, but again, it kind of comes down to the partnership that, different areas and regions are just trying to work together and that sort of thing. So, thank you.
All right, anybody else have any questions in the chat?
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. And again, I mean, my contact information's up there. Just michael.roberts2. I don't know if you guys wrote that down and put it back up there.
We can call you whatever.
Yeah. Say, hey, Mark, what's going on? I'm like, all right, I'll tell you.
And to anybody joining us via Zoom, if you signed into the chat, I will be sure to send over some stuff via email that some people got today here in class in person. Okay,
Excellent.
thank you so much,
Appreciate it.
Michael. How
Thank
about
you.
a round of applause?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.